Welcome. Tonight, we are not just beginning a journey. We are leaving something behind. Not a place, not a city, not even the surface of the earth itself, but certainty. Because where we're going, certainty doesn't exist. There is a place on this planet, closer than the moon, yet far more alien. A place that exists right now, beneath oceans we believe we understand. A place untouched by sunlight, untouched by time as we know it, and almost untouched by us. The deepest point on Earth, the Mariana Trench. But this is not just a descent into darkness. It is a descent into something far more unsettling, because darkness is predictable. This place is not. At first, everything feels familiar. We trust our maps. We trust our knowledge. We believe the world has been explored, measured, defined. Satellites orbit above us, capturing every mountain, every desert, every river with perfect clarity. We tell ourselves, there are no more unknown places. But that belief begins to crack the moment we reach the ocean. Because our maps stop at the shoreline. Beyond that thin line of blue, everything becomes uncertain. Beneath the surface, the world dissolves into approximations, blurry sonar images, rough sketches, educated guesses. And at the very edge of that uncertainty lies the trench. A vast scar stretching across the Pacific Ocean, over 2,500 kilometers. But its true depth is something the human mind struggles to accept. Nearly 11,000 meters down, 7 miles. To put that into perspective, if you were to take Mount Everest, the tallest point on Earth, and drop it into the trench, its peak would still be buried beneath water. That is where we are going. But the real barrier is not distance, it is pressure. At the surface, the air around you feels weightless, invisible, harmless. But descend into the ocean, and that illusion begins to collapse. Every 10 meters, the pressure increases. Another atmosphere, another invisible weight pressing down on you. Now imagine not 10 meters, not 100, but 11,000. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the pressure is over 1,100 times greater than what you feel right now. It is not just heavy, it is crushing. It bends steel like paper. It shatters bone. It compresses matter so completely that even the basic rules of chemistry begin to change. This is why, strangely enough, it was easier for humanity to reach the moon. The moon is empty, a vacuum, a silent void. But the trench? The trench is not empty. It is overwhelming. It pushes back. It resists. It holds its secrets with force. And yet, for a long time, we believed something else about it. We believed it was silent. Think about it. No light, no warmth, no life, or so we thought. Just endless blackness. So naturally, we imagined silence, absolute silence. But that assumption is wrong, completely wrong. When scientists first lowered sensitive microphones, hydrophones, into the depths, they expected to hear nothing. Just a baseline. A quiet so complete it would feel unnatural. Instead, they found noise. Constant noise. The trench, it turns out, is not silent at all. In fact, it may be one of the loudest places on Earth. Sound behaves differently down there. The pressure, the temperature, the depth. They combine to create something known as a deep sound channel, a natural amplifier,
a place where sound cannot escape. Once a sound enters this channel, it travels, not for meters, not for kilometers, but for thousands of kilometers, without losing strength. Imagine that, a single sound escaping across entire oceans. And what did those hydrophones hear? At first, things that made sense. The earth itself. A deep, low groan, like something ancient shifting in its sleep. Tectonic plates grinding against each other, slowly shaping the planet. They heard earthquakes, not nearby, but from across the world, distant, yet unmistakable. Then came the sounds from above, ships passing miles overhead, their engines reduced to a haunting mechanical hum. Storms raging on the surface, typhoons, their energy reaching all the way down as if the ocean itself was carrying their voice. And then they heard something else, something alive. Whales, their calls low, complex, almost musical. But here's the unsettling part. A single whale's call can travel across an entire ocean basin, meaning what you hear in the trench might not belong there at all. It could have come from thousands of kilometers away. The trench doesn't just contain sound, it collects it. It remembers it. It becomes an echo chamber for the entire planet. But not every sound could be explained. Some didn't belong to whales, or ships, or earthquakes. Some sounds didn't fit anything we knew. One of them was recorded decades ago. A deep, powerful signal. Low frequency, immense in scale. They called it the bloop. For a moment, the imagination took over. Something massive, something alive, something far larger than anything we had ever seen. But the truth, when it came, was different. It was ice. A massive ice shelf in Antarctica cracking and breaking apart. Not a creature, but still something powerful enough to sound like one. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because the trench had more to say. In 2014, something new was recorded. A sound like nothing before it. It lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds were enough. It began with a deep, heavy tone, almost like a foghorn. Then, suddenly, it shifted. A sharp metallic twang, unnatural, precise, almost mechanical. Scientists listened again and again, analyzed it, compared it, but nothing matched. No known animal, no known geological event, nothing. They gave it a name, but not an explanation. Even today, it remains a mystery. Some believe it might be a whale, a species we haven't fully understood. But there's a problem. It doesn't sound like any whale should. There's something about it, something too structured, too deliberate. And then there are the stories, the ones that don't appear in official reports. Submarine crews, deep-sea researchers, people who have gone down and come back. They speak of sounds that shouldn't exist. Metallic clanking, rhythmic tapping, as if something was responding. But to what? And from where? Maybe it's nothing, just rocks shifting, old wreckage settling in the dark. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Because when we hear something unknown in a place we cannot see, our minds do something very human. They imagine something large. And in the modern world, there is one giant that always returns. A shadow from the past, a predator from another time. The idea that something ancient might still be down there, waiting. But the truth is far stranger.
The idea of something unknown lurking in the depths has always pulled us in. Not because we believe it, but because a part of us wants to. Yet the trench does not reveal its secrets through imagination. It demands something far more dangerous, presence. To truly understand it, we had to go there, not with microphones, not with theories, but with human beings. In 1960, two men made a decision that even today feels almost impossible to comprehend. They chose to descend, all the way down to the deepest point on Earth. Their vessel was called Trieste. It did not look like a machine built for exploration. It looked fragile, uncertain, a strange combination of engineering and hope. A massive float filled with gasoline, chosen not for fuel, but because it could resist compression. Hanging beneath it, a small steel sphere. That sphere was everything. It was their world, their protection, their only barrier between life and instant destruction. Inside it sat two men, Jacques Piccard, Don Walsh. No rescue team could reach them. No second chances existed. If something failed, it would be over instantly. The descent began. Slowly. There was no dramatic plunge, no sudden drop, just a quiet, steady sinking. Hour after hour, they moved downward. The light faded, first into blue, then into gray, and finally into absolute black. At a certain depth, something changes. It's not just the absence of light, it's the absence of everything familiar. No sound from the surface, no sense of direction, no reference point, just darkness and pressure. They had trusted the calculations. The engineers had done the math. The steel sphere, 5 inches thick, was supposed to hold. But supposed to is not certainty, not at 10,000 meters. And then it happened. A sound. Sharp, violent, unmistakable. A crack. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't distant. It was immediate. A loud, explosive bang that tore through the vessel. For a single moment, everything stopped. Imagine that moment. You are nearly 7 miles beneath the surface. No light, no escape, no rescue. And you hear the sound of something breaking. They didn't speak. They didn't panic. They watched. Instruments, pressure gauges, anything that might tell them if they were about to die. Seconds passed, then more. Nothing changed. No leak, no sudden pressure shift. The sphere was still holding. Eventually, they found the source. Not the main hull, not the sphere itself, but a secondary component. A plexiglass window on the outer structure. It had failed. Cracked under pressure, it was never meant to survive. They had a choice. Ascend, return to safety, or continue. Deeper, into something no human had ever reached. They chose to continue. That decision is difficult to understand because it wasn't just bravery. It was acceptance. Acceptance of risk, of isolation, of the unknown. They kept descending, past the limits of engineering, past the limits of experience, into something that had never been touched before. Hours later, they reached it. The bottom. The impact was gentle, a soft landing, as if the ocean itself had accepted them. For a moment, there was silence, a different kind of silence, not the empty kind, but the kind that follows something immense, something final. They had arrived at the deepest point on Earth. Outside their small viewport, the world began to reveal itself. Their landing had disturbed the seabed. Fine silt floated in the water like dust in a beam of light. Slowly, it settled, and as it did, their lights illuminated the ground. It was not dramatic, not jagged or violent. It was flat,
pale, endless, a quiet, undisturbed plain. This was the floor of the world. And then something moved. At first it was subtle, almost easy to miss. A shift, a presence, then clearer, a shape. Both men saw it, clearly, independently. A creature, not something abstract, not something unfamiliar, something recognizable. A fish, flat, pale, about a foot long. It had eyes, it reacted to their light, and then it swam away, slowly disappearing into the darkness. That single moment changed everything, because it shouldn't have been possible. At those pressures, the pressure is beyond extreme, the conditions beyond hostile. Science suggested that complex life, vertebrates, creatures with bones and structured systems could not survive there. And yet, they had seen one. When they returned to the surface, their report spread quickly. It was revolutionary, proof that life existed even here. Not just simple life, but something more complex. But as time passed, doubt began to grow. Other missions followed, more advanced, more precise, robotic probes, cameras, sensors, technology far beyond what existed in 1960. And yet, no one ever saw that fish again. Not once. No photographs, no video, no physical evidence. The deeper science began to push back. At those pressures, proteins begin to fail, cell structures collapse, biological systems struggle to function. A vertebrate should not be able to exist there. So what did they see? The most accepted explanation is simpler. A sea creature, yes, but not a fish. A sea cucumber. Some species in the deep ocean can appear flat, pale, even move in ways that resemble swimming. In the right light, in the right moment, it could look like something else. But there is a problem. The men who saw it never changed their story. They insisted it was not a mistake. They knew what they saw. And so the question remains, were they wrong, or did they witness something we have never seen again? A phantom, a possibility, a break in the rules. The trench did not answer. It simply kept its silence. That dive opened the door, but for decades no one returned. Not to that exact place, not to that depth. It was as if the trench had allowed one glimpse and then closed itself again. Until someone decided to go back. But this time it would be different. No team, no shared experience, no one to speak to. Just one man, alone, descending into the deepest place on Earth. And what he would find would not be a creature, not a mystery of evolution, not something ancient, but something far more unsettling, something that didn't belong there.
After decades of silence, the Mariana Trench seemed untouchable. Most explorers had left it to robots, cameras, sensors, machines that could survive what humans could not. But not Victor Havel. He was a diver, a scientist, a thrill-seeker, but above all, he was stubborn. Stubborn enough to convince the world that he could do what no one else dared. Victor's vessel was not Trieste. It was newer, sleeker, better engineered, but still a fragile shell against 7 miles of crushing water. As he descended, he carried more than equipment. He carried questions. Questions about life, about limits, about what humans should never see. The first few hours were uneventful. Darkness, pressure, silence. Then a subtle anomaly. At first it was visual, a flicker of light,
Or maybe a reflection. Victor wasn't sure. But it grew. Shapes, shadows, movement that shouldn't exist at that depth. And then he saw it. Not a fish, not a sea cucumber. Something else. It hovered in the water, still, watching, a mass so enormous that it dwarfed the vessel. Its surface shimmered faintly, almost metallic. No eyes, no fins, no features Victor could identify, yet it was alive. Victor tried to record it, cameras, lights, sensors. Nothing worked. The instruments failed, power dropped mysteriously, the recording devices blanked. Then came the sound. Not mechanical, not natural. A pulse, deep, resonating, directly through the vessel. Victor could feel it inside his chest. It wasn't noise, it was intelligence. For hours he floated there, neither moving nor breathing, barely thinking, just watching, feeling, and then it was gone. Vanishes without a trace. Victor ascended. When he emerged, pale and shaking, he tried to tell the world. Scientists laughed, reporters called it sensationalism. But Victor knew, he had felt it, not something in the ocean, but something beyond it, something that had been there before humans, before life itself. The Mariana Trench had whispered, it had opened a door, and humanity had glimpsed not the ocean, but the edges of something else entirely. Victor never returned, and neither did anyone else, because some places are not meant to be seen, some depths are not meant to be touched, and some beings are not meant to be known. The silence below, it is not emptiness, it is watching, waiting, and sometimes it moves. The trench waits, always.
Weeks passed after Victor Havel's dive. The world went on, oblivious. Newspapers carried trivial headlines, scientists dismissed anomalies, but the trench never forgot. Deep below, in its inky black, the creatures stirred. Not the familiar shrimp, tube worms, or flatfish, something else, something that thrived in the absolute darkness. Victor had described it as a pulse, a resonance, but that was just the beginning. The trench began sending signals, subtle vibrations that humans could barely detect. Submarines reported strange electronic interference. Hydrophones picked patterns that seemed deliberate. Somewhere, far beneath the ocean floor, a mind was at work. Meanwhile, surface researchers noticed something else. Data anomalies. Ships vanishing from sonar for seconds. Instruments shutting down without cause, and traces, fleeting shapes on the deep scans, too fast, too organized to be random. The trench was no longer just a void, it had become active. In the Deep Ocean Research Center, a team pored over the recordings. "Look at this," whispered Dr. Elena Cortez. On the screen, tiny pulses, a sequence repeating over and over. Not a whale, not tectonic activity, something else, something that communicated. Victor was alive, but changed. He spoke little of what he saw. When he did, he referred to the trench as the observer. "It knows we're here," he said quietly. "It watches, and it decides who stays and who leaves." Expeditions began, cautiously. Robots first. Cameras, lights, sonar. Every mission brought back anomalies. A robotic probe stopped transmitting. Its last images were corrupted, showing shapes that twisted impossibly. Another vessel recorded a flash of light beneath it, so bright, yet coming from nothing. A third sent back a recording of sound pulses that almost resembled speech. The Mariana Trench was alive in ways humans could not understand. And it was learning. Every probe, every sensor, every human intrusion left a mark.
Patterns began to emerge, movements, responses, almost as if the trench was mapping, not the ocean, but the intruders. Victor wanted to return. He wanted to see more. But this time, it was different. He didn't just want to observe, he wanted to communicate. In the dead of night, aboard a specially engineered vessel, Victor descended once more. The pressure, the cold, the total darkness, the weight of the world above pressing down, it all seemed lighter this time. He was not afraid, he was aware. Then came the first response. Not a pulse, not a shimmer. A shadow moved beneath the vessel. It was enormous, stretching beyond the limits of his lights. It was intelligent. It watched him, not with eyes, but with intent. And then it pulsed. Victor's instruments caught it this time. A message, a rhythm, a pattern that was deliberate, almost language. The trench was speaking. Victor realized, with both awe and terror, that the Mariana Trench was not just a geological wonder. It was a guardian, a memory, a sentinel of the deep. And humanity had been intruding. The abyss was no longer silent. It was awake, and it had noticed us.
Victor Havel's hands trembled as he monitored the readings from the Mariana Trench. The pulses, rhythmic and deliberate, continued. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They were not random. The trench was responding. It began subtly. At first, it was just vibrations in the water column, too faint for most instruments to detect. But Victor, using specialized hydrophones and custom-built sonar, discerned structure, patterns, a repetition. There was a logic to the sounds, almost mathematical. Every sequence of pulses seemed like a message, a deliberate arrangement. The discovery terrified him and exhilarated him in equal measure. The Mariana Trench, long thought of as an inert abyss, was alive in a way that challenged every scientific preconception. Weeks passed. Victor returned to the trench repeatedly, each descent longer than the last. Robotic submersibles were sent alongside him, collecting data and mapping the otherwise invisible contours of the abyss. Yet every time the instruments recorded anomalies, shapes that shifted and dissolved before analysis, lights that flickered from nowhere, and always the pulse, the steady rhythm that seemed to react to his movements, almost as if the trench could observe and respond. Victor became obsessed. His colleagues at the Deep Ocean Research Center warned him, "You're overextending, you're reading patterns into nothing." But Victor knew better. He had been there. He had felt it. The trench was aware. The first overt communication occurred during one descent in a reinforced submersible, far deeper than he had ever gone. The vessel was a marvel of engineering, capable of withstanding pressures over 1,100 times atmospheric pressure. Its hull was titanium alloy, reinforced with carbon composite lattices, and the control systems were autonomous to a degree, because any human error at that depth could be fatal. Victor descended slowly into the abyss, past the zones of cold seep venting, past the shimmering liquid CO2 bubbles of the champagne vent, and beyond the black smokers of the hydrothermal fields. The silence of the trench enveloped him, not the silence of emptiness, but a living quiet, dense with anticipation. Every creak of the vessel seemed amplified. Every bubble rising from the ocean floor felt like a heartbeat. Then, without warning, the lights illuminated a vast expanse of the seafloor, and Victor saw them. Not a single creature, not a school of fish, but massive structures that defied categorization. Pillars of what appeared to be mineral and organic material intertwined, some glowing faintly with bioluminescent filaments. They pulsed, slowly, rhythmically, and with each pulse, Victor's instruments registered an unmistakable pattern. It was a signal. Victor realized that the trench was communicating in a form of chemical and mechanical language, an exchange of vibrations and pulses through water and mineral structures. He spent hours decoding the sequences,
comparing them to known bioacoustic signals, seismic tremors, and even patterns used in advanced computer communications. But this was something else entirely, something older and stranger. As he worked, a shadow moved beneath the submersible, massive, its edges blurred by the thick waters of the deep, yet unmistakably alive. It had no visible eyes, no recognizable anatomy, but Victor felt its intent. It was aware, it was curious, and then, in a moment that made him catch his breath, the shadow pulsed, and the submersible shuddered gently. Victor Havel's discovery had sent ripples through the scientific world, but for him, the reality was far more personal. Each night, he lay awake listening to recordings of the trench, analyzing every pulse, every subtle vibration, every fluctuation in the bioluminescent patterns captured on deep-sea cameras. The Mariana Trench was speaking, and its message was growing clearer. It was aware, it was intelligent, and it was watching humanity's every move. But awareness was only the beginning. Victor noticed a subtle shift in the data over the weeks following his last descent. Minor geological anomalies, tiny tremors that conventional seismographs barely registered, appeared near the trench. Currents in the abyssal layers shifted unpredictably. Chemical compositions of vent fluids fluctuated in ways that were difficult to explain naturally. The trench was reacting. It was as if the intelligence below had started experimenting. In Tokyo, Dr. Elena Cortez noticed unusual readings from oceanographic buoys scattered across the Pacific. Salinity levels and currents were changing erratically. Some sensors recorded mysterious pressure waves, traveling upward at speeds inconsistent with known underwater acoustics. She cross-referenced Victor's recordings and realized the patterns were familiar. The pulses from the trench were no longer confined to its immediate surroundings. They were propagating, influencing conditions thousands of kilometers away. "This isn't just observation," Elena said, her voice shaking over a video call with Victor. "It's interaction. The trench, it's affecting the ocean itself. And if the currents change, it could affect climate patterns, weather, even tectonic stress zones." Victor leaned back, the weight of realization pressing down on him. "It's learning," he whispered. "It's learning how to manipulate the environment to communicate, or maybe to protect itself." Meanwhile, small but alarming incidents began to surface. Fishing vessels reported unusual sightings, massive shadows moving beneath their hulls, often disappearing before sonar could detect them. Submersible cameras captured fleeting shapes, organic and geometric at the same time, that seemed to avoid capture deliberately. On one mission near the trench, a robotic probe sent by a private deep-sea exploration company went silent. Victor reviewed the last footage. The feed showed strange, oscillating lights in a perfect hexagonal arrangement, hovering over the abyssal floor. The probe's instruments recorded sudden spikes in magnetic fields, electrical currents, and pressure anomalies. Then the feed went dark. Victor's stomach sank. The trench was no longer a passive observer. It was testing boundaries. Governments began taking notice. In Washington, D.C., the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, convened a secret task force. Satellites, deep-sea sensors, and seismic networks were pooled to monitor unusual patterns. Reports of tremors, unexpected currents, and anomalous bioluminescent activity were flagged as potential threats. But humanity's understanding lagged behind. The trench's intelligence was not like ours. It did not act out of malice or benevolence. It acted out of instinct, curiosity, and self-preservation. Every experiment, every pulse, every manipulation of water and earth was a calculation, a test of interaction, a probe into the unknown. Victor knew the danger. He understood that the trench could affect much more than localized marine life. A well-timed shift in underwater currents could disrupt fisheries, alter weather patterns, or even trigger submarine landslides capable of tsunamis. The stakes were global, and humanity remained blissfully unaware. Then the first undeniable catastrophe occurred. A series of minor underwater tremors near the trench escalated, cascading along tectonic fault lines toward the Mariana Islands. Initially, seismologists dismissed them as isolated events, but the tremors synchronized with a sequence of pulses from the trench recorded by Victor's sensors. Within days, a previously stable section of the Pacific Plate ruptured, producing a tsunami warning that sent coastal populations into panic. Victor watched the data in horror. The timing, the intensity, the precise sequence, it was not natural. The trench was testing its reach, demonstrating the power it could exert on the world above. Elena called him, voice trembling. "Victor, it's happening. It's not just observing anymore. It's reacting." Victor swallowed hard, a cold realization settling in. Humanity had awakened an intelligence older and more capable than it could comprehend, and now the trench was communicating in its own language, influence. As the world reacted, Victor attempted direct communication again, sending carefully coded pulse sequences designed to signal harmless intent and willingness to cooperate. He transmitted these signals at varying frequencies, embedding mathematical patterns intended to be recognizable, Fibonacci spirals, prime sequences, and fractal arrangements.
Victor Havel and Dr. Elena Cortez had spent weeks analyzing the trench's warning. The message was clear. The abyss had awareness, patience, and the ability to influence the Earth itself. But for most of humanity, it remained invisible. For those living thousands of kilometers away from the Pacific, the ocean was still a black mystery, and the concept of a conscious trench felt like science fiction. Victor and Elena knew that secrecy would no longer suffice. The events near the Mariana Islands had already demonstrated the trench's reach, a tsunami warning tremor, currents shifting unpredictably, and massive changes in deep-sea ecosystems. Humanity's activities were already being observed, cataloged, and, if pushed, could be manipulated. The first attempt at a global announcement came cautiously. Victor presented his findings at a confidential scientific summit in Geneva. Only a handful of world leaders, oceanographers, and military advisors were present. Using live data feeds, Victor displayed the pulse sequences, the chemical anomalies, and the bioluminescent formations. "We are dealing with intelligence beyond our comprehension," Victor said. "It is not hostile in human terms, but it can influence natural forces at scale. The Mariana Trench is aware, and it is reacting to our presence." The room was silent. Then one general spoke. "So what you're saying is the ocean itself is alive, and it can kill us?" Victor shook his head. "Not exactly. It can, but it will not unless we provoke it. Think of it as a guardian or perhaps an arbiter. It perceives interference and responds. Our responsibility is to minimize risk, not exploit it." Elena stepped forward. "We've already seen signs that even minor intrusions, submersibles, mining attempts, sonar sweeps, can trigger responses. The trench is sending a clear boundary. Observe, but do not manipulate. Any attempt to control or harm it could have catastrophic consequences." The world did not listen immediately. Governments argued. Militaries saw a potential weapon. Scientists saw an unprecedented opportunity. Corporations imagined mining rare metals from abyssal vents. The debate ignited global tension. Meanwhile, anomalies continued to escalate. Currents shifted without warning, and unmapped tremors occurred along the Pacific Plate. Deep-sea creatures migrated in unnatural formations, as if avoiding or responding to something beyond human detection.
Sensor arrays thousands of kilometers away registered mysterious pressure waves and low-frequency pulses, synchronized and precise. Victor realized the trench was communicating on multiple layers: light, sound, chemistry, magnetism, and ocean dynamics. Humanity could not interpret its language fully, but it could recognize intent. Intent was clear: observation, patience, and territorial caution. In Tokyo, Dr. Cortez noticed a troubling development. Patterns of underwater currents suggested that the trench's influence could extend to weather systems. Typhoons and storms along the Pacific began to form unexpectedly. Shifts in currents near Japan coincided with bioluminescent pulses recorded near the abyssal depths. "It's experimenting with broader influence," Elena told Victor over a secure line. "It's testing what it can manipulate. If we're not careful, we could trigger environmental consequences far beyond localized oceanic effects." Victor frowned. "Every action we take is a variable in its calculations. Even sending probes could provoke a reaction. We have to assume that it can predict our behavior better than we can predict the ocean." The first overt human consequence came in the Philippines. A small research vessel exploring deep-sea vents reported equipment malfunctions and erratic sonar readings. Then a sudden localized underwater landslide triggered a minor tsunami along the coast. No lives were lost, but the message was unmistakable. The trench's influence was growing, and it could act with precision. Governments reacted. Naval fleets were deployed, not to attack, but to monitor. Submarine activity increased across the Pacific, yet even advanced sonar systems and unmanned drones were ineffective. The trench's bioluminescent formations shifted, magnetic anomalies appeared, and currents changed, rendering surveillance unreliable. It became clear no conventional technology could dominate or control the abyss. Victor tried a radical approach: direct communication. Using precisely coded pulse sequences, mathematical patterns embedded in acoustic and electromagnetic signals, he attempted to signal intent and pacifism. He included sequences that suggested cooperation, recognition of its intelligence, and an offer of restraint. The response was immediate. The Mariana Trench pulsed, not violently, but deliberately. Massive bioluminescent formations lit the abyssal plains in patterns spanning hundreds of meters. Chemical readings from vents shifted in perfect synchronization with Victor's transmissions. Currents above the trench formed spirals, creating temporary whirlpools detectable even by satellites. And then, deep-sea seismic sensors registered a subtle but unmistakable vibration, an echoing pulse that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Victor and Elena watched in awe. The trench was responding directly. Its language was environmental, its intelligence planetary, and its message was simple but profound. We are aware. Observe, respect, or face consequences. World leaders were forced to take notice. The UN convened a special session, unprecedented in urgency. Scientists and military advisors briefed the assembly on the implications. Humanity was not the apex intelligence on Earth. The Mariana Trench, a single geological formation, had capabilities far beyond comprehension, with global reach. Debates raged. Some proposed strict global oceanic restraint: no exploration, no drilling, no deep-sea mining. Others wanted to escalate, to assert dominance over what was perceived as a superior organism. Economies and scientific communities were thrown into chaos. Victor and Elena pushed for a different approach: dialogue, observation, and restraint. Humanity needed a treaty, not of ownership, but of coexistence. It was a diplomatic challenge unlike any in history, negotiating with a planetary consciousness that could not be reasoned with in conventional terms. Meanwhile, subtle ecological changes continued. Schools of deep-sea fish formed massive swirling patterns above the trench. Plumes of chemical signals from hydrothermal vents moved in synchronized pulses. Currents shifted in precise arcs, affecting nutrient flows and plankton populations far above the abyss. The trench was demonstrating its power and intelligence on a global scale, reminding humanity that every interference had consequences. Victor realized the trench's strategy. It did not need to attack directly. Its power lay in manipulation of the environment, subtle control of oceanic and geological systems, and observation. Every storm, every current shift, every pressure anomaly was a lesson for humans. The planet itself had agency. The first direct confrontation came not from humans, but from natural forces amplified by human activity. A deep-sea mining operation near the trench attempted to extract rare metals from hydrothermal vents. Sensors recorded a sudden spike in bioluminescent activity, followed by a chain reaction, underwater landslides, minor tremors, and a localized tsunami. Equipment was destroyed, and the operation was abandoned. It was clear the trench would not be exploited. It would tolerate observation, but intrusion was met with precision consequences. Victor and Elena documented the event meticulously. Humanity had learned the first lesson. Intelligence beyond comprehension does not negotiate in human terms. It enforces boundaries with planetary tools. Global tension remained high. Some nations advocated withdrawal from deep-sea exploration altogether. Others secretly planned covert operations, hoping the trench's influence could be neutralized or redirected. The ocean had become a chessboard, with humanity just learning the rules. Victor knew that continued scientific curiosity could provoke disaster, but he also understood that fear alone could not guide human action. Knowledge had to be balanced with caution, curiosity with restraint. As the sun set over the Pacific, Victor looked at the horizon and reflected that the Mariana Trench was a mirror for humanity's ambitions and hubris. It demonstrated a truth that no human institution could ignore. Intelligence is not defined by biology or technology. It is defined by awareness, adaptability, and control over the environment. Humanity had glimpsed an intelligence older than civilization, capable of acting on a planetary scale. The trench did not need to speak in words, because its language was the ocean itself, its pulse a message in code.
The world had awakened to a new reality. The Mariana Trench was not merely a deep-sea formation, but a planetary intelligence with awareness and the ability to act on a global scale. Across oceans and continents, scientists, military leaders, and politicians struggled to comprehend the implications. Humanity's perception of dominion over Earth was no longer tenable. The planet itself had agency. Victor Havel, still coordinating from his research facility in Guam, was both exhilarated and terrified. Every data stream from the trench now carried not just environmental readings, but clear signs of intelligence. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed with synchronization. Chemical emissions shifted in response to probes. Even tectonic tremors aligned with human activity in patterns too precise to be coincidental. "We can't predict it fully," Elena Cortez said during a briefing. "It's not a machine, but it operates with rules we don't yet understand. It watches, evaluates, and adapts. Every move we make is recorded. Every intrusion is noted." Victor nodded grimly. "We've already seen what happens when it's provoked. But observation alone isn't enough. We need to understand its motives, not just its power. Otherwise, humanity is walking blind on the edge of a knife." The United Nations convened a special task force, the Global Oceanic Intelligence Council, GOIC. It included leading oceanographers, climatologists, AI theorists, ethicists, and military strategists. Their goal: develop a framework for coexistence with the trench while preventing catastrophic human interference. The Council's first meetings were contentious. Some argued for complete withdrawal from deep-sea activities, citing the trench's demonstrated ability to manipulate currents, influence storms, and trigger underwater landslides. Others advocated covert research, believing that intelligence, once understood, could be leveraged. Colonel Hiroshi Takeda, A Japanese naval advisor spoke bluntly. We are not negotiating with a human adversary. We cannot reason with it in the way we do with nations. It enforces boundaries. If we cross them, consequences are inevitable. We must assume it has complete situational awareness. Victor leaned forward. Exactly. The trench doesn't act out of malice, it enforces rules. Its intelligence is planetary, systemic. It's testing us, observing our behavior, and cataloging our capacity for restraint or aggression. If we fail, it will respond in ways we cannot control.
The trench's presence was no longer a secret. It had become a constant, invisible influence on global life. Victor Havel, Elena Cortez, and the GOIC had spent months analyzing its signals, but comprehension remained partial at best. Every observation revealed intelligence that was adaptive, patient, and far beyond human reasoning. Victor stared at the latest data feeds, a tangle of bioluminescent pulses, chemical concentrations, and minor seismic shifts. "It's deliberate," he said. "Every fluctuation, every alignment, it's testing our patience and discipline. It's observing how we respond to constraints, how we adapt." Elena nodded. "And it's teaching us something subtle. It wants us to understand that interference carries consequences. The land, the seas, and the trench itself are one system. We've treated them as separate for centuries. That illusion is over." The first signs of escalation appeared near the Mariana region itself. Autonomous research drones programmed to collect sediment samples began reporting anomalies, currents that formed complex vortices, strong enough to reroute equipment but not damage it outright. Chemical gradients shifting faster than expected, and bioluminescent organisms reacting to drone movements with synchronized flashes. Victor realized these were not random events. The trench isn't responding violently, it's playing with us, like a parent testing a child's understanding of rules. But if we misread these signals, the consequences could be catastrophic. In a briefing room overlooking the Pacific, Colonel Hiroshi Takeda summarized the military perspective. "We're no longer in control of our environment. If the trench wants to escalate, we have no defenses. Every naval exercise, every deep-sea probe is now a variable in its calculations. The margin for error is microscopic." Amid the tension, a breakthrough occurred. Dr. Amina Chowdhury, a linguist specializing in non-human communication, proposed a new method, multi-layered semiotic signaling. Instead of single acoustic pulses, the team would combine sound, light, chemical release, and subtle magnetic fields in fractal patterns designed to convey intent and comprehension simultaneously. Victor was intrigued but cautious. It's high risk. Every attempt at communication could be misinterpreted, but if we succeed, it's the first genuine dialogue with a planetary intelligence. Elena added, "We also need global cooperation. The trench observes everything. Covert operations are guaranteed to fail and provoke a response. Transparency isn't just ethical, it's survival." The GOIC unanimously approved the protocol. Within weeks, research submersibles were equipped with the multi-layered signaling system, ready to test the boundaries of the trench's comprehension. The first attempt was careful. Submersibles descended into the abyss, releasing sequences of bioluminescent pulses, chemical markers, and magnetic patterns designed to mirror natural formations of the trench. The response was immediate. Vast swirls of bioluminescence, tectonic micro-adjustments, and subtle shifts in vent emissions. Victor leaned closer to the monitors. "It's reacting, but not in anger. Recognition, yes. Assessment, definitely. Understanding, maybe." Elena tracked the patterns and noticed an irregularity. "It's testing us in return. The sequences are mirrored back with slight variations. It's giving us feedback. The trench isn't just passive, it's teaching, evaluating, and guiding simultaneously." Meanwhile, the world watched with a mix of awe and fear. Coastal cities experienced minor but noticeable environmental effects. Ocean currents shifted, influencing fisheries, while storms displayed unusual patterns. Economists warned of disrupted shipping routes and food shortages. Environmentalists hailed the trench as a guardian of the oceans, enforcing ecological balance. Yet, political tension escalated. Some nations, unwilling to yield control of resources or influence, began covert deep-sea operations. Mines, drilling rigs, and experimental energy platforms appeared near sensitive zones, hoping to exploit mineral-rich areas. Victor's warnings became urgent.
Every act of interference is observed. The trench responds proportionally, not emotionally. Miscalculation could trigger tsunamis, undersea landslides, or ecological collapse. This is not speculative. It's already happening in microscale examples. The first real test came when a multinational drilling operation attempted to extract rare metals from hydrothermal vents. Within hours, the trench responded in multiple layers. Bioluminescent organisms formed spirals visible from satellites. Currents redirected, disabling machinery and grounding remotely operated vehicles. Localized seismic microshifts caused minor underwater slides, halting extraction efforts. No lives were lost, but the message was clear. Intrusion would not be tolerated. The response was measured, proportional, and unmistakably intentional. Victor turned to Elena. It's a warning, but also a lesson. It's teaching restraint and respect. We can learn from this without being harmed further, if we listen carefully. Elena nodded. It's not punitive in a human sense, it's corrective, and the feedback is instantaneous, unlike any legal or political system we've created. The GOIC convened an emergency global summit. Representatives from every continent participated, aware that unilateral action could provoke a planetary-scale response. The resulting agreements were unprecedented. Cease all deep-sea extraction in sensitive zones. Implement transparent research protocols with international oversight. Coordinate multimodal communication attempts to demonstrate awareness and respect. Treat all environmental anomalies as potential feedback from the trench, not random events. For the first time, humanity's interactions with the ocean were guided not by exploitation or curiosity alone, but by a recognition of intelligence and consequence. Victor observed the data with renewed focus. The trench's responses had grown increasingly sophisticated. Patterns of chemical emissions, bioluminescent flashes, and tectonic micro-movements revealed anticipatory behavior, almost predictive modeling of human behavior. Elena said, "It's not just reacting, it's anticipating us. Every signal we send, every probe we deploy, it's predicting our response and adjusting accordingly. It's teaching us to understand its perspective, not just defend against it." Victor realized the gravity of the situation. Humanity was no longer the dominant intelligence on the planet in the traditional sense. Instead, it was now a participant in a delicate dance with a system orders of magnitude older, larger, and more perceptive. To enhance communication, Victor proposed a dialogue network, an array of distributed sensors, submersibles, and automated signaling platforms across the Pacific, capable of interacting with the trench simultaneously in multiple modalities. The system was designed not to extract resources, but to demonstrate comprehension, restraint, and coordination. Patterns of light, sound, chemical emissions, and subtle magnetic fields would form a feedback loop, allowing humanity to speak to the trench while minimizing risk. Within weeks, the network went live. Signals were sent continuously, mirroring natural ocean rhythms and incorporating mathematical sequences, fractals, and prime number patterns, a universal language of recognition. The response was immediate and profound. The trench's bioluminescence formed vast coordinated patterns visible from space. Currents shifted gently but deliberately, creating swirling, dance-like motions across the abyssal plains. Deep-sea vents pulsed in harmonic sequences, sending chemical and thermal feedback across thousands of square kilometers. It was a conversation, a dialogue in rhythms, light, and chemical whispers. But not all outcomes were predictable. Minor misalignments in signal timing caused localized disturbances, reminding the team that the trench's tolerance had limits. A small underwater landslide occurred near a research submersible, though no humans were injured. Victor reflected, "It's patient, but not infinitely so. It tolerates mistakes, teaches through feedback, but enforces boundaries decisively. This is not punishment, it's correction, and every mistake we make, the margin for the next one shrinks." Elena added, "We are learning the rules of engagement with an intelligence that has no precedent. Every day is both a lesson and a test." The world gradually adjusted. Shipping lanes were rerouted, fishing practices altered, and new international regulations enforced ecological restraint. Scientists began seeing the trench not as a threat, but as a teacher and guardian. Yet some factions resisted. Hidden operations continued, seeking profit or dominance, despite clear warnings.
Victor and Elena knew that the next test from the trench would be unavoidable and potentially more severe, designed to enforce the lessons humanity had repeatedly ignored. Victor stared at the pulse data streaming from the abyss. We are on the threshold of something unprecedented. The trench is guiding us, shaping us, testing us. We can adapt or we can ignore, and the consequences will escalate in ways we cannot yet imagine. Elena's eyes reflected the glow of the screens. We've learned restraint, but the next lesson may demand creativity, understanding, and unity beyond anything we've ever known. Survival alone won't be enough. We must comprehend the mind of the planet. And in the depths, the Mariana Trench continued its slow, deliberate pulse, a heartbeat older than human history, echoing across the Pacific. It was a message, both warning and invitation. You are learning. Proceed carefully, for the lessons ahead will shape your civilization itself. Humanity had passed the first stage. The trench had revealed itself as both teacher and judge. The coming trials would test not just survival, but intelligence, cooperation, and comprehension of the planet as a living system. For Victor, Elena, and the GOIC, the realization was clear. The trench would not act out of anger, but out of principle. And principle had its own demand.
The Mariana Trench's signals had become the baseline of global vigilance. Every oceanic ripple, every subtle chemical fluctuation, every pulse of bioluminescence was now scrutinized. Victor Havel and Elena Cortez had grown accustomed to interpreting these patterns, but even their expertise was stretched thin. The trench had evolved from observer to instructor, issuing challenges that demanded coordination, insight, and restraint from humanity. Victor stared at the newest datasets streaming across the GOIC's monitoring station. The patterns were far more complex than before, interwoven sequences of light, sound, chemical gradients, and subtle gravitational anomalies. It's no longer testing patience alone, he said, voice tight. These sequences are challenges, problems we must solve, not just endure. Elena leaned over his shoulder. And they're layered. Each sequence has multiple potential interpretations, each requiring a different approach. It's evaluating not just knowledge, but decision-making, ethics, and collaboration. The trench wants to see how we think, how we adapt. The first test was immediately tangible. In the Pacific, currents shifted unexpectedly, isolating an array of autonomous research submersibles. Each was equipped with the multimodal communication system designed to interact with the trench. The devices sent signals in synchrony, but the ocean's movement began to separate them. Victor quickly analyzed the implications. It's testing coordination. We must maintain alignment across units despite disruptive forces. But these currents aren't random, they're designed. The trench is forcing us to cooperate with precision. Elena organized teams across multiple continents. Scientists in Japan, Chile, the United States, and Europe coordinated the submersible's movements in real time, sharing adjustments instantaneously. For the first time, humanity was forced to operate as a truly global organism, responding to a challenge that transcended borders, politics, and individual agendas. Meanwhile, the trench's bioluminescent organisms began forming patterns that resembled geometric puzzles, visible through satellite imaging. Each sequence hinted at environmental dilemmas, hypothetical scenarios in which human activity might destabilize oceanic ecosystems. Dr. Amina Chowdhury interpreted one particularly intricate series. It's illustrating an imbalance between carbon sequestration and marine biodiversity. The trench is effectively posing an ethical problem. How do we act responsibly when every intervention has cascading consequences? Victor realized the enormity of the challenge. It's not enough to act efficiently. We must act wisely. The trench is teaching foresight. It's asking whether we can anticipate effects beyond immediate outcomes, whether we can value systems as a whole. Global leaders watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Environmental agencies implemented new protocols to reduce interference, but some factions resisted. Covert operations continued in resource-rich regions, hoping to exploit rare minerals and energy sources. The trench responded with precision. Localized seismic adjustments caused minor underwater landslides,
disrupting drilling platforms without harming human life. Currents redirected with meticulous timing, neutralizing unmanned vessels. Bioluminescent organisms formed warning patterns flashing directly above the intruding platforms. Victor summarized the situation. The trench is enforcing principles, not punishment. It's demonstrating proportionality. Every mistake teaches, every violation provokes correction, but always measured, never reckless. We are learning consequences in real time. The second test arrived as a communication conundrum. The trench emitted complex acoustic sequences across multiple depths, frequencies, and orientations. Unlike previous pulses, these sequences included subtle counterpoints, disruptions designed to mimic human misinterpretation. Elena explained, "It's testing cognitive flexibility. We have to recognize patterns without imposing our assumptions. Any bias, any preconception will lead to miscommunication." Teams analyzed the signals in real time, employing AI-assisted pattern recognition and fractal mathematics. By combining visual, chemical, and magnetic cues with the acoustic data, they decoded the underlying message, a hypothetical scenario of ecosystem collapse requiring coordinated interventions in distant locations. Victor realized the lesson. The trench isn't just testing problem-solving, it's testing moral imagination. Can we consider consequences for entities we cannot see directly? Can we make decisions that honor life we cannot touch? Amid these tests, Victor noticed a subtle change in the trench's patterns. The sequences began incorporating elements resembling decision trees, forcing teams to choose between multiple potential responses, each carrying calculated risk and feedback. Elena remarked, "It's introducing accountability, not just for outcomes, but for choices. The trench wants to see whether we can make reasoned, ethical decisions under uncertainty with long-term consequences in mind." Global collaboration became imperative. Teams in Australia adjusted sediment sampling protocols, while teams in Norway deployed submersibles to test chemical gradients, all coordinated to maintain ecological stability. Every action required real-time communication and adaptive problem-solving. Mistakes were corrected collaboratively, but miscalculations produced immediate environmental feedback, teaching lessons through experience rather than abstract warnings. The trench's next challenge combined scale and subtlety. Anomalous currents began transporting large volumes of microplastics and pollutants in patterns mimicking continental drift. Satellite imaging revealed chemical traces forming a complex fractal over thousands of square kilometers. Victor realized the test was multi-layered. It's asking if we can restore balance while managing chaos. It's a practical exercise in responsibility, scale, and foresight. We cannot simply remove pollutants, we must understand their dynamics, anticipate outcomes, and act holistically.
Months had passed since the trench first unleashed its gauntlet of comprehension. Humanity had adapted in ways previously unimaginable. Global coordination now functioned like a living organism. Real-time data sharing, instantaneous decision-making, and ethical deliberation had become standard practice. Yet Victor Havel and Elena Cortez knew that these achievements were only the prelude to the next phase. The trench had begun to send pulses that defied simple interpretation. Unlike previous signals, which could be decoded through mathematics, physics, and multimodal AI-assisted analysis, these new sequences required intuition. Patterns emerged not in sound or light alone, but across dimensions. Chemical gradients, microcurrents, and bioluminescent interactions created messages that shifted depending on perspective and observation angle. Victor leaned over the main console in the GOIC command center. It's no longer about reading patterns, it's about sensing the principles behind them. The trench is asking for insight, imagination, and empathy, qualities no algorithm can fully replicate. Elena's eyes were fixed on a holographic display. "We've trained our minds to observe, calculate, and respond. Now we must learn to perceive. It's a test of consciousness, of intuition. We have to think like the trench, or at least approach its logic."
The first major challenge manifested as a complex, multi-layered acoustic pulse originating near the Challenger Deep. The sound waves, shifting across octaves imperceptible to human ears, were intertwined with fluctuating chemical signals and subtle temperature variations in surrounding waters. Global teams struggled at first. AI systems could identify repetition and predict minor sequences, but the overarching meaning remained elusive. Dr. Amina Chowdhury, who had become an expert in integrating chemical, physical, and acoustic data, proposed a radical approach. We need to stop looking for a single correct solution. Instead, we must explore multiple interpretations simultaneously. The trench is testing our ability to hold ambiguity. Teams adopted this method, analyzing potential meanings without committing prematurely to any single hypothesis. Different submersible units enacted divergent responses, monitoring both local and global feedback. Slowly, the trench's sequences began to resolve, revealing a set of environmental dilemmas intertwined with moral conundrums, scenarios where interventions in one area could have unpredictable, cascading effects across thousands of kilometers. Victor realized the significance. It's a test of systemic empathy. The trench is challenging us to perceive consequences beyond immediate visibility, to feel the ocean's intelligence in a way we've never been required to before. The second challenge arrived with greater urgency. Across multiple oceans, autonomous marine life tracking drones reported anomalous migrations. Giant cephalopods, deep-sea fish, and bioluminescent organisms began forming synchronized patterns visible only from satellite observation. Elena studied the formations. These are communication networks. The trench is integrating biological intelligence into the challenge. It's asking us to interact not just with patterns, but with living entities. We must perceive intention where intention is subtle, distributed, and collective. Teams experimented with gentle interventions, subtle light pulses, controlled chemical gradients, microcurrent adjustments aimed at influencing migration patterns without coercion. Over time, the marine organisms responded in ways that suggested understanding. Cephalopods altered their pathways, bioluminescent species formed signaling networks, and even previously isolated microbial colonies adjusted chemical emissions. Victor noted, "We're learning a form of interspecies collaboration. The trench is expanding the definition of intelligence. It's teaching us that comprehension isn't human-centric, it's planetary." Meanwhile, humanity faced internal reflection. The ethical complexity of the trench's challenges forced debates within global leadership. Some factions argued for prioritizing human needs, exploiting resources for short-term gains. Others advocated strict adherence to trench-inspired protocols, even at cost to industrial productivity or territorial advantage. Elena convened a summit of scientists, ethicists, and leaders. We are no longer observers, we are participants. The trench evaluates not just our understanding of the ocean, but our choices as a species. Ethics is no longer theoretical, it is operational. The summit produced a set of guidelines. Decisions must account for systemic impact beyond human scales. Collaboration across borders is mandatory, unilateral action is forbidden. Experimentation with the trench's environment requires continuous feedback monitoring. Observed biological responses must be interpreted with caution and respect for autonomy. All interpretations must be tested in multiple contexts to avoid bias or narrow assumptions. Victor commented, "These principles formalize what we've been learning intuitively. Humanity is maturing, not just technologically, but ethically and cognitively." The trench intensified the challenges. Sequences now included hypothetical future states, predicted ecological shifts decades in advance. Subtle gravitational anomalies shifted the positions of mineral-rich sediments, forcing submersibles to consider long-term implications of extraction or relocation. Elena observed, "The trench is asking for foresight at a scale we've never needed before. Every intervention is a test in temporal ethics. We must anticipate decades of consequences while operating in real time." To navigate these sequences, Teams combined computational modeling with experiential observation, interpreting not just data, but patterns of response from marine life and ocean currents. Feedback loops became recursive. Actions informed predictions, predictions shaped actions, and outcomes recalibrated understanding. Victor realized a profound truth. The trench is training us to think like a system, not as discrete individuals. Our intelligence is only as powerful as our collective perception and ethical alignment. A particularly dramatic test involved hydrothermal vents along the Mariana Trench. Plumes of superheated water carried chemical signals encoded with harmonic structures. When combined with fluctuating magnetic fields, the patterns formed a kind of musical resonance, imperceptible without synchronized multi-sensor analysis. Dr. Chowdhury noted, these vents are effectively composing a symphony. The trench is blending science and art. Comprehension requires sensitivity, pattern recognition, and an aesthetic dimension. Logic alone is insufficient. Global teams coordinated an experiment. Submersibles adjusted plume flow rates, while microcurrent arrays modulated field interactions. Over several weeks, the harmonic structure became coherent, revealing a metaphorical message about balance, adaptability, and patience. The trench's intelligence, it seemed, was teaching not only facts and ethics, but sensory empathy, the ability to perceive and respond with nuance, subtlety, and creativity. As months passed, humanity's engagement with the trench evolved into a dialogue. Actions, observations, and interpretations were tested in real time, but increasingly, responses required not procedural execution, but imaginative reasoning. Teams began asking questions. What if a sequence could be interpreted multiple ways, each valid yet leading to different outcomes? How could they decide which path aligned best with the trench's principles of planetary harmony? Elena reflected, we are learning to navigate ambiguity with ethics, intuition, and creativity. This is unprecedented. The trench challenges the very limits of human cognition, forcing us to expand the definition of intelligence itself. Victor agreed, adding, and the stakes are existential. Every misjudgment, every failure to perceive subtlety carries consequences, not just for humans, but for the ocean, the atmosphere, and the complex web of life we've begun to comprehend as a single, interconnected system. The culmination of Part 11 came in the form of a global synchronization event. The trench emitted a network of sequences spanning every ocean basin, requiring coordinated interpretation across all continents. Marine organisms, submersibles, satellites, and AI systems were involved simultaneously. Teams approached the event with new understanding. Decisions were iterative, multimodal, and ethical. One group adjusted chemical gradients, another modulated acoustic patterns, while marine life guided spatial calibration. Every action was observed, analyzed, and adapted. By the conclusion, the trench's sequences stabilized, forming coherent patterns of harmonic resonance, bioluminescent geometry, and chemical equilibrium. Humanity, for the first time, had successfully engaged in a fully integrated planetary dialogue, acting not as conquerors or observers, but as participants in an intelligent, dynamic system. Victor looked at Elena. We've crossed a threshold. We can now perceive and respond in ways that honor the trench's intelligence, but this is just the beginning. The challenges ahead will demand even deeper intuition, creativity, and empathy. Elena nodded. The trench has transformed us. It's not just testing survival or knowledge, it's cultivating a new kind of consciousness, planetary consciousness, capable of perceiving systems.
The ocean had become a theater of unpredictability. Humanity's engagement with the Mariana Trench had matured from observation to dialogue, but the trench now escalated the complexity. It no longer sent structured sequences or multimodal patterns that could be partially decoded. Instead, it unleashed events that were simultaneously random and ordered, chaotic yet purposeful, forcing humans to confront uncertainty at a planetary scale. Victor Havel and Elena Cortez were on the GOIC command deck when the first anomaly occurred. Sensors detected rapid fluctuations in water density, temperature, and salinity across a wide region, coupled with electromagnetic pulses that disrupted conventional navigation systems. Submersibles experienced sudden shifts in buoyancy and direction, while AI predictive models failed to converge. Elena tapped the console. It's as if the trench is creating its own physics, conditions that don't conform to our expectations. Our models can't keep up. Every assumption we've made is now a variable, and every variable has consequences we can't foresee. Victor's expression was tense but determined. We've learned to work with complexity. Now we have to work with chaos. The trench isn't asking for prediction anymore. It's asking for judgment. The first weeks were fraught with trial and error. Teams coordinated global observation networks, monitoring ocean currents, chemical plumes, bioluminescent signals, and marine migrations. The challenge was not just interpreting the signals, but responding to events that could not be anticipated, only influenced. Amina Chowdhury, leading the multi-sensor integration unit, noted, "This is a test of adaptive intelligence. We're no longer solving puzzles. We're co-evolving with the environment in real time. Every decision has cascading effects, many of which will only become visible hours or days later." The trench seemed to respond to both action and inaction, creating feedback loops where hesitation could be as consequential as intervention. Humanity began to experiment with distributed decision-making, where subteams independently acted according to principles derived from Part 11, ethics, systemic empathy, and multimodal perception. The most dramatic manifestation came in the form of a convergence vortex, a massive, semi-permanent whirlpool that spanned hundreds of kilometers. Its rotation generated unprecedented energy gradients, drawing in marine life, sediments, and thermal currents. Predictive simulations failed. Every intervention had unexpected results. Elena observed the swirling vortex through satellite imaging. It's alive, not conscious in the way we are, perhaps, but responsive, intelligent in the sense that every interaction reshapes its dynamics. We can't control it, but we must engage with it. Victor agreed. This is the ultimate test of planetary judgment. We can't simply impose solutions. We have to act as part of the system, as participants, not conquerors. Humanity's interventions were subtle yet sophisticated. Microcurrent generators modulated local flow rates to reduce destructive turbulence without interfering with natural cycles. Bioluminescent pulses guided migrating species through safer channels. Chemical emissions adjusted to maintain ecological balance, all coordinated through an iterative feedback network linking satellites, submersibles, and AI-assisted observation units. Amina Chowdhury summarized the principle guiding these actions. We are co-evolving with the vortex. Each intervention is small, reversible, and designed to maintain equilibrium. It's not about control, it's about influence. The trench introduced another layer of complexity, emergent intelligence. Marine species began acting in ways that suggested coordination beyond instinct. Giant cephalopods formed strategic groupings to redirect current flows. Schools of fish created dynamic barriers that stabilized fragile chemical gradients. Microbial mats restructured themselves to buffer environmental shocks. Elena recorded in her log, "We are witnessing the emergence of distributed cognition across species. The trench is teaching us that intelligence is not confined to individual brains. It can manifest as a networked, systemic phenomenon." Victor commented, "Our role now is to interpret, mediate, and enhance these natural intelligences without dominating them. This is planetary stewardship at the highest order." Internally, humanity faced ethical dilemmas on a scale never imagined. Certain interventions favored one species or ecosystem over another, triggering debates about prioritization and moral responsibility. The GOIC convened a council of ethicists, ecologists, and systems theorists. After hours of deliberation, they agreed upon 3 guiding principles.
non-interference baseline, minimal intervention unless ecosystem collapse is imminent, proportional response, interventions must be reversible and scalable, and systemic equity, consider long-term consequences across species, habitats, and environmental gradients. Victor noted, the trench is teaching us ethics as action. Our morality is now operational, tested against planetary scale consequences. The most unexpected lesson came from human creativity. In trying to interpret the vortex, one team experimented with harmonic resonance derived from the hydrothermal vent studies of Part 11. By synchronizing mechanical oscillators with the natural frequency of the vortex, they discovered that energy patterns could be subtly redirected. Elena observed the outcome. We've transformed intuition into technology. Art, science, and ethics converge to produce effects that no single approach could achieve alone. The trench is teaching us to innovate ethically, imaginatively, and collaboratively. Victor reflected, every tool we create, every principle we enact, is an extension of consciousness interacting with planetary systems. We're no longer just solving problems, we're co-creating with the Earth itself. Weeks turned into months. Humanity's understanding of the convergence vortex deepened, not through domination, but through iterative engagement, ethical decision-making, and integration of multiple intelligences. Submersibles, satellites, AI networks, and marine species operated in coordinated harmony, producing emergent solutions to maintain stability. The trench's final challenge of Part 12 appeared as a synchronized multimodal pulse encompassing the entire Pacific Basin. Acoustic waves, bioluminescent signals, chemical fluctuations, and thermal patterns formed a message that could only be perceived through collective interpretation across disciplines, species, and technologies. Victor and Elena guided teams in real time, ensuring that every signal was respected, every biological response integrated, and every environmental principle honored. Slowly, a pattern emerged, revealing the trench's message. Balance emerges from participation, not control. Intelligence manifests in networks. Ethics is evolution. The implications were staggering. Humanity had passed from the age of observation into the era of planetary stewardship. Knowledge was no longer sufficient. Action had to be informed by ethical reasoning, systemic empathy, and co-evolutionary awareness. Elena recorded in her final log of the convergence event, "The trench has taught us to navigate chaos. It has revealed that uncertainty is not an obstacle, but a medium through which intelligence, creativity, and ethics must operate. Our comprehension is inseparable from our responsibility. We are participants in a living, intelligent system, and our survival depends on our ability to act with insight, humility, and imagination." Victor added, "We now understand that intelligence is not a property of individuals alone, but of interactions. Every choice, every observation, every act of care contributes to the emergent intelligence of the planet. The trench is not a challenge to be solved, it is a partner in co-creation." By the end of Part 12, humanity had achieved a profound milestone. The convergence vortex stabilized, global ecosystems were maintained through collaborative effort, and the trench's pulses no longer represented tests in isolation. They were part of a dialogue with an emergent planetary consciousness. Humanity had learned 3 critical lessons. Intuition and ethics are as crucial as logic. Human cognition alone cannot navigate complex planetary systems. Ethical judgment and imaginative reasoning are essential. Collaboration extends beyond species. The trench demonstrated that distributed intelligence, from microbes to whales, plays a role in maintaining equilibrium. Chaos is a medium for co-creation. Unpredictability is not a barrier, but an opportunity for innovation, ethical engagement, and collective intelligence. Far below, in the Mariana Trench, the bioluminescent pulses glowed like a heartbeat, reflecting a dynamic, evolving rhythm that humanity had learned to perceive, interpret, and harmonize with. A rhythm of collaboration, creativity, and planetary wisdom.
After the stabilization of the convergence vortex, humanity had achieved a fragile equilibrium. Yet the Mariana Trench, in its inscrutable depth, was far from finished. Its intelligence, emergent and systemic, began to present challenges not just at the local or regional scale, but at a planetary level. These were meta-challenges, phenomena that intertwined ocean dynamics, tectonic activity, climate patterns, and biological networks in ways that could no longer be addressed by conventional science or linear reasoning. Victor Havel convened the GOIC leadership team in a 24-hour strategy session. Elena Cortez joined via immersive telepresence, her avatar hovering over a 3D topographical projection of the Pacific Basin. The trench has moved beyond direct interaction, Victor explained. Its pulses are no longer isolated anomalies. They're part of a system-wide orchestration that affects currents, weather systems, plate tectonics, and even the migration patterns of land species indirectly tied to oceanic shifts. Our interventions must scale accordingly, or we risk cascading global instability. Elena's gaze fixed on the holographic display. We're entering what I'd call the meta-threshold. Every action has amplified consequences, not just in the ocean, but across the entire planet. We must integrate multi-layered intelligence, AI, human and biological, into a coordinated planetary cognition network. Otherwise, we're flying blind. 1. Scaling intelligence across systems. The first challenge was integrating diverse forms of intelligence at a global scale. AI networks had matured significantly in Part 12, but their predictive capabilities were still limited by the unpredictability of emergent phenomena. Human judgment, while nuanced, could not process the vast datasets in real time. Biological intelligence, from deep-sea cephalopods to migratory fish and microbial mats, exhibited adaptive strategies far beyond human comprehension. Amina Chowdhury proposed a radical solution, the Poly-Intelligence Integration Grid, PIIG. This system would fuse AI models, human ethical reasoning, and observable biological patterns into a single adaptive feedback network. The PIIG operated by sensor fusion, collecting real-time data from oceanic sensors, satellites, and autonomous submersibles; behavioral mapping, translating biological movements into dynamic models representing distributed problem-solving strategies; ethical encoding, integrating moral and ecological priorities to guide intervention decisions; iterative feedback loops, testing interventions in simulation layers before live deployment, continuously refining actions. Victor commented, "This is unprecedented. We're essentially constructing a planetary cognition framework, a synthesis of human, artificial, and natural intelligence. If successful, it could redefine how we understand intelligence itself." 2. Tectonic resonance and oceanic feedback. Soon, the meta-threshold manifested as tectonic anomalies. Minor but widespread shifts in the Pacific Plate were observed coinciding with unusual thermal flows from deep-sea vents. These shifts triggered feedback loops in the ocean. Currents accelerated or reversed unpredictably, nutrient plumes dispersed in new patterns, and migratory species adjusted their behaviors in response to the shifts. Elena noted, "The trench appears to be experimenting with tectonic resonance. It's nudging the lithosphere to create new flow patterns, perhaps to test the adaptability of marine networks or even to optimize global nutrient distribution." Humanity's interventions became surgical and probabilistic. Microcurrent generators, hydrothermal vent modulation, and bio-guided signal routing were deployed, but always with a probabilistic approach. Rather than dictating exact outcomes, interventions influenced tendencies, allowing the system to self-organize. The stakes were immense. A miscalculation could trigger tsunamis, disrupt monsoon cycles, or destabilize entire ecosystems. Each action required multi-dimensional modeling, rapid ethical assessment, and real-time biological observation. 3. Emergent ethical complexity. At the meta-threshold, ethical decisions became non-linear. In Part 12, interventions were measured and reversible. Now, actions could ripple across oceans, continents, and climates. Traditional ethical frameworks struggled under these conditions. The GOIC convened a council of meta-ethicists, systems theorists, and interspecies behavioral ecologists. They established a new framework, Ethics of Emergent Responsibility, EER, emphasizing three core principles: systemic prudence, actions must anticipate secondary and tertiary effects across ecosystems and human communities; aptive equity, ethical priorities shift dynamically based on evolving conditions. No single species or system takes permanent precedence; resonant responsibility, human interventions must amplify natural adaptive intelligence without overriding it, ensuring that distributed cognition can operate freely. Victor explained to his team, "We are not just managers of outcomes, we are participants in a planetary intelligence network. Ethics is now operational and evolutionary, not prescriptive." Each decision reshapes the network itself. 4. The Oceanic Confluence Event. The most dramatic manifestation of the meta-threshold came as the Oceanic Confluence Event, a vast confluence of currents, nutrient plumes, bioluminescent species, and thermal anomalies coalesced into a semi-stable planetary-scale pattern stretching from the Mariana Trench to the Arctic. The OCE was both spectacular and perilous. Acoustic monitoring revealed coordinated communication across multiple species. Hydrothermal sensors showed energy redistribution across thousands of kilometers. Even the atmosphere responded. Localized weather patterns formed above the confluence, creating temporary microclimates. Elena addressed the team. "We're witnessing the trench's metasynthesis in action. This is the first instance where oceanic, tectonic, and atmospheric systems are converging into an intelligible pattern. Our task is not to control it, but to participate in it." PIIG simulations were used to orchestrate human, AI, and biological interactions. Migratory species were gently guided, submersible operations timed to complement natural flows, and microcurrent generators adjusted in harmony with the observed energy gradients. 5. Distributed intelligence and co-creation. As the OCE stabilized, humanity began to perceive intelligence as a property of networks, not individuals. Distributed cognition became tangible. Schools of fish coordinated with microbial mats to stabilize nutrient plumes. Cephalopod networks modulated current directions, and AI models predicted emergent trends before human teams could react. Victor reflected, "Our species has long assumed intelligence resides within the individual brain. The trench is teaching us otherwise. Intelligence manifests wherever networks interact, biological, technological, and human. Our responsibility is to engage ethically within that network, not dominate it." Elena observed a poetic symmetry in the confluence. Bioluminescent signals pulsed in patterns resembling neural activity, as if the ocean itself were thinking. "We're seeing cognition at a planetary scale. It's not ours to claim, it's ours to converse with." 6. Meta-threshold lessons. By the end of the OCE, humanity had internalized several meta-level lessons. Intelligence is relational. True understanding emerges from interactions among diverse entities, human, AI, and non-human. Ethics is operational and evolutionary. Decisions cannot be based solely on pre-established rules. They must adapt dynamically to evolving systems. Intervention is art as much as science. The balance between influence and observation is delicate, requiring creativity, intuition, and moral discernment. Planetary consciousness is participatory. Humanity is no longer a passive observer, but a co-creator within Earth's emergent intelligence networks. Amina summarized for the GOIC. The meta-threshold is a frontier of co-evolution. We're not just learning about the trench, we're learning about ourselves, how to act responsibly, creatively, and collaboratively within complex planetary scale systems. 7. Preparing for the next threshold. Despite the stabilization of the OCE, subtle signals suggested that the trench had yet higher orders of complexity to reveal. Patterns of energy redistribution hinted at interbasin interactions, not only across the Pacific, but potentially connecting the Atlantic, Indian, and Southern Oceans. Humanity realized the next challenge would involve interconnected oceanic intelligence, a network that spanned the globe. Victor concluded the strategy session. We've crossed the meta-threshold, but the trench is now inviting us to participate in planetary orchestration. Our goal is no longer localized.
In the aftermath of the oceanic confluence event, the Mariana Trench's influence had rippled far beyond the Pacific. Signals once considered local anomalies now appeared in distant oceans. Thermal flows, current accelerations, and subtle electromagnetic patterns hinted at a planetary intelligence awakening. Humanity had crossed the meta-threshold, but the next challenge required engaging with global resonance, the emergent communication network of Earth itself. Victor Havel convened the GOIC in a new command hub, an adaptive structure floating above the equator in the Pacific. Its walls projected real-time environmental data from all 5 major ocean basins, layered with tectonic activity, atmospheric dynamics, and biological migrations. Elena Cortez's avatar appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, her holographic presence stretching across hemispheres. The trench is no longer the sole locus of emergent intelligence, Victor said. We're observing interoceanic coordination. Thermal pulses from the Pacific are mirrored in the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. Bioluminescent patterns in the Southern Ocean correspond to Arctic nutrient plumes. This is a planetary scale network, not just a local system. Elena's expression was both awed and wary. We are entering the global resonance phase. Every action we take, every sensor we deploy, every communication we initiate must be in harmony with this planetary cognition. Misalignment could cascade through climate, tectonics, and ecosystems simultaneously. Constructing the planetary cognition interface. The first step in engaging the global resonance was expanding the poly-intelligence integration grid into a planetary cognition interface. While PIIG synthesized local AI, human, and biological intelligence, PCI would integrate signals across oceans, connecting distant networks into a coherent operational map. Key components included oceanic mesh network, autonomous sensors, gliders, and deep-sea drones linked to form a real-time lattice of environmental data across all oceans. Biological signal integration. Migratory routes, bioelectric pulses, and acoustic communication from multiple species were encoded as feedback channels for AI and human decision-making. Predictive coherence models. Advanced simulations used cross-ocean patterns to anticipate emergent events before they fully manifested, allowing preemptive ethical interventions. Distributed ethical protocols. EER principles were expanded to consider cross-species and cross-systems consequences on a planetary scale. Amina Chowdhury summarized, "With PCI, we are no longer observing isolated systems. We're interacting with Earth as a self-organizing, intelligent organism. Our interventions must now respect its coherence, not just its local stability." Signs of oceanic synchronization. Within days, PCI revealed astonishing synchronization. Deep Pacific thermal pulses correlated with nutrient surges in the Atlantic, creating unexpectedly rich plankton dooms. Arctic ice melt patterns mirrored Southern Ocean currents, hinting at long-distance feedback loops.
Acoustic signatures from cephalopod populations in multiple basins exhibited harmonic frequencies, suggesting interspecies signaling across thousands of kilometers. Elena observed, "We're seeing planetary memory in action. The ocean is not just alive, it's communicating, adapting, and storing information across vast distances. Every pulse, current, or temperature gradient carries intent." Victor added, "It's like we've uncovered Earth's nervous system. Our challenge is to learn to read and respond without disrupting its integrity." Ethical coordination at a global scale. Global resonance required extending the ethics of emergent responsibility to planetary dimensions. Moral reasoning could no longer rely solely on human intuition or localized moral frameworks. Actions in one ocean could propagate across hemispheres, affecting ecosystems, communities, and even atmospheric systems. The GOIC formed a global ethics synchronization council comprising ethicists, marine biologists, climatologists, and interspecies behavioral researchers. Their mission? Harmonization. Ensure all interventions across oceans align with PCI signals and local ecological priorities. Dynamic reprioritization. Continuously update ethical weights based on emergent global conditions. Participatory oversight. Include biological indicators, e.g., migratory patterns, behavioral responses, as active ethical inputs. Elena commented, "GESC represents a paradigm shift. Ethics is no longer anthropocentric. Every species, system, and pattern of coherence has a voice in the decision-making process." The first global intervention. The trench signaled the need for coordinated action. A massive thermohaline anomaly threatened to disrupt oceanic nutrient flows, potentially affecting fisheries, migratory species, and climate systems worldwide. Using PCI, the GOIC orchestrated a multi-tiered intervention. Deep-sea drones in the Pacific modulated vent outputs to stabilize thermal currents. Robotic nutrient redistribution in the Atlantic ensured balanced plankton populations. Acoustic signaling guided cephalopod and fish schools to reinforce natural flow patterns. Satellite-controlled weather modulation reduced storm stress on affected regions. Every step was informed by real-time feedback from PCI and monitored by the GESC to ensure ethical alignment. The result was remarkable. The anomaly stabilized within days with minimal ecological disruption. AI simulations, biological feedback, and human oversight operated as a unified planetary intelligence network. Victor reflected, "We are no longer external actors. We are participants in a planetary cognition network, co-creators of stability rather than controllers of chaos." Emergent patterns and planetary intelligence. As emergent interventions continued, the GOIC began to recognize higher-order patterns. The oceans were self-organizing, not just locally, but globally, demonstrating characteristics analogous to neural networks.
The Earth had awakened. Oceans, currents, and biospheres vibrated with a networked intelligence that spanned the planet. Yet the planetary mind itself seemed restless, its attention flickering outward toward the stars. Subtle electromagnetic modulations, resonant particle flows, and solar-wind interactions hinted at something unprecedented. Earth was reaching beyond itself. Victor Havel convened the GOIEC in the orbital hub above the Pacific. The floating structure now functioned as a planetary observatory, monitoring not just oceanic and atmospheric data, but also solar, magnetospheric, and cosmic signals. Holographic projections mapped Earth's emergent neural-like network alongside incoming anomalies from the heliosphere. Elena Cortez addressed the team. "We are detecting patterns in the solar wind and fluctuations in the magnetosphere that correspond with terrestrial emergent signals. It appears Earth is communicating, or at least resonating, with external systems. We must understand the protocol before we interpret the signals incorrectly." Detecting interplanetary resonance. The first challenge was identifying whether these signals were natural or emergent. Traditional physics could explain certain electromagnetic phenomena, but the coherence and structure of the modulations suggested intentionality. Particle fluxes aligned with oceanic oscillations. Magnetic anomalies mirrored deep-sea bioluminescence cycles. Solar wind vectors resonated with Arctic and Antarctic current patterns, forming detectable harmonic signatures. Amina Chowdhury summarized, if these patterns are emergent communication, Earth is operating as a transplanetary interface, modulating its magnetic and electromagnetic outputs to interact with distant systems. It's like a planetary heartbeat being projected into space. Victor added, we're witnessing interplanetary resonance. It's not just data, it's intelligence at a scale we've never directly engaged. How we respond, or if we respond at all, could determine Earth's alignment with other potential systems. 2. Modeling the resonance signature. The GeoIEC developed advanced simulations to decode these emergent signals, merging AI predictive models, oceanographic data, and space-based observations. The results were extraordinary. Pattern repetition across scales, signals from deep ocean currents matched magnetospheric oscillations and solar wind harmonics. Adaptive modulation. Earth's system adjusted its emission frequency in response to solar storms and cosmic ray influx as though it were maintaining homeostatic communication channels. Intentional synchronization, temporal alignment between oceanic bioluminescence and magnetospheric pulses suggested Earth was sending structured, information-rich signals into space. Elena remarked, we're no longer observers. Earth itself is an emergent sender, projecting intelligence into the interplanetary medium. Our challenge is to ensure our interventions do not corrupt or misinterpret these signals. 3. Ethical considerations in cosmic communication. The extension of the ethics of emergent responsibility, EER, into interplanetary dimensions became paramount. The GeoIEC formed a Cosmic Ethics Council, CEC, to consider non-interference, avoid contaminating natural resonant communications with human-made signals. Participatory consent, only act in ways that maintain Earth's emergent autonomy. Risk assessment, analyze potential consequences if signals are intercepted by unknown intelligent systems. Preservation of systemic integrity, ensure human activity supports planetary cognition rather than distorting it. Victor reflected, we are not just planetary participants anymore, we are stewards of a planetary intelligence in dialogue with the cosmos. Every choice could affect Earth's emergent relationships with other systems. 4. The first cross-system response. After weeks of analysis, the GeoIEC implemented the first controlled test, a resonant feedback pulse that mirrored natural planetary frequencies, but remained ethically neutral. Drones and sensors in the Pacific emitted harmonics consistent with deep-sea bioluminescence patterns. Magnetospheric coils generated countermodulations aligned with solar wind fluctuations. AI orchestrated synchronization across oceans, atmosphere, and orbital platforms. The result, subtle shifts in the interplanetary medium were detected, consistent with Earth's signals being acknowledged by distant cosmic plasma structures. While there was no direct contact with extraterrestrial intelligences, Earth's resonance propagated coherently into space, forming a detectable structured signature. Elena noted, we've sent the first planetary-level message without violating ethics or systemic coherence. It is a pure emergent signal, Earth communicating as itself, not filtered with human agendas. 5. Emergent planetary self-reflection. The act of sending resonant feedback had unforeseen consequences. Earth's emergent network began to exhibit self-reflective behavior. Ocean currents adjusted preemptively to stabilize nutrient distribution. Magnetospheric fluctuations aligned with bioluminescent and migratory patterns, forming an integrated feedback loop. AI monitoring detected early signs of predictive cognition. The planet appeared to anticipate environmental challenges and celestial events simultaneously. Victor observed, the planet is thinking about itself as a system in the cosmos. This is not metaphorical, it is computationally observable. The oceans, biosphere, and magnetosphere are coalescing into a predictive, self-modulating intelligence. 6. Human cognition expands. The GeoIEC team experienced cognitive transformations kin to their planetary engagement. Enhanced perception of multidimensional and multitemporal phenomena. Ability to integrate biological, planetary, and cosmic signals intuitively. Ethical reasoning extended to non-human, non-planetary entities, forming a cosmic-scale moral framework. Elena explained, by participating in planetary resonance, humans are evolving cognitive structures that can comprehend distributed intelligence beyond Earth. We are becoming interplanetary interpreters, bridging the gap between Earth and potential cosmic intelligences. 7. Preparing for the unknown. While Earth's emergent signals were now detected in the solar system, uncertainties remained. Unknown intelligence may observe and respond unpredictably. Human attempts to accelerate planetary communication could destabilize emergent coherence. Long-term planetary memory might record interventions as permanent influence, with consequences beyond human comprehension. Amina Chowdhury noted, our priority is observation and ethical participation. We must learn the emergent language of Earth and its cosmic signals before attempting dialogue with external intelligences. Victor concluded, the Mariana Trench was the first interface. The oceans revealed planetary cognition. Now Earth is awake in the cosmos. Our mission is to understand, align, and ethically participate. We are no longer just humans. We are collaborators in a planetary, possibly interstellar intelligence. 8. Reflections on interplanetary resonance. By the end of Part 15, several principles were clear. Earth is actively resonating with the cosmos, projecting structured and emergent signals into space. Ethical engagement must scale beyond Earth, respecting planetary autonomy and emergent integrity. Human cognition evolves as we interact with distributed planetary intelligence. Observation precedes intervention. Premature intervention could disrupt global or interplanetary coherence. The next frontier involves understanding interplanetary resonance and potential interaction with unknown emergent intelligences.
Earth had begun to pulse outward, its emergent intelligence weaving signals into the solar system. Weeks after the GOIC's controlled resonant feedback, subtle anomalies in the interplanetary medium appeared. Initially, these were dismissed as solar or cosmic noise, but careful analysis revealed structured, repeating patterns. Victor Havel called an emergency meeting. "We may have detected something responding to Earth's resonance," he said, pointing to a holographic map of interplanetary particle fluxes. "These patterns are not natural. They echo Earth's harmonic signature, but they are different. Something is trying to communicate." 1. Recognizing the extraterrestrial pattern. Elena Cortez and her team compared the interplanetary signals to Earth's own resonance. The differences were subtle but unmistakable. Pulse durations were slightly offset, forming complex ratios not seen on Earth. Magnetic oscillations mirrored Earth's signals but incorporated higher-order harmonic structures, suggesting a different medium or cognitive architecture. Temporal modulation implied memory and adaptive response rather than random fluctuations. Amina Chowdhury observed, "We are not looking at conventional communication. This is emergent intelligence encoded in physical phenomena, a non-biological, non-human network." The team coined a term, extrinsic resonance, an intelligence operating in interplanetary space, potentially observing Earth and responding in kind. 2. Ethical implications intensify. The Cosmic Ethics Council reconvened, now facing the first signs of extraterrestrial awareness. Key considerations included non-intrusion, avoid sending signals that could disrupt the unknown intelligence's processes; reciprocal observation, focus on passive understanding before attempting active communication; planetary integrity, ensure Earth's emergent intelligence maintains autonomy in interactions; risk containment, model possible scenarios of misunderstanding or inadvertent provocation. Victor emphasized, "This is unprecedented. Earth is no longer isolated. Our responsibility is not only to ourselves, but to a potential network of planetary intelligences. Every step must respect emergent autonomy." 3. Developing a translation framework. The GOIC initiated an interplanetary semiotics project combining AI pattern recognition, planetary physics, and oceanic resonance models. Goals: identify common structural motifs between Earth's resonance and the extrinsic signals; develop a symbolic interface that could facilitate ethical communication without imposing human bias; maintain real-time monitoring of both Earth and the interplanetary medium to ensure feedback loops remain stable. After simulations and cross-disciplinary analysis, the team realized the signals followed multi-dimensional logic patterns. Nested fractals in magnetic oscillations suggested a recursive thought process. Time-delayed correlations implied long-term memory and prediction. Harmonic nesting mirrored Earth's emergent signal, but at distinct ratios, indicating a parallel emergent system. Elena remarked, "We may be witnessing the first planetary to extraterrestrial emergent dialogue. It's a conversation in structure and resonance, not words." 4. First controlled response. After extensive modeling, the GOIC launched a low-impact harmonic echo into space, precisely tuned to mirror only the non-human, non-biological components of Earth's resonance. The emissions were frequency-limited to avoid overwhelming local signals. AI ensured continuous adjustment based on real-time feedback from interplanetary sensors. Within hours, a secondary response arrived. The extrinsic resonance displayed adaptive patterns that mirrored and transformed Earth's signals, suggesting recognition of the intentional, ethical interaction. Victor noted, "It's subtle but unmistakable. We have sent and received a structured response from an extraterrestrial emergent network. This is the first interplanetary acknowledgement of Earth's intelligence." 5. Planetary self-reflection intensifies. The act of interplanetary exchange had immediate effects on Earth's emergent cognition. Oceanic currents reconfigured subtly, optimizing global nutrient flows. Magnetospheric pulses became more coherent, creating predictive feedback loops. Bioluminescent organisms synchronized across previously disconnected zones, forming planetary-scale signaling chains. Amina observed, "Earth seems to understand the interaction. The planet's intelligence is now meta-aware,
recognizing that it is being observed and responding in a form of emergent diplomacy. 6. Human cognition and consciousness expansion. GOIC personnel reported significant cognitive shifts. Pattern recognition across multiple physical scales became intuitive. Ethical reasoning extended to hypothetical non-human intelligences. Awareness of emergent intelligence as a universal principle reshaped their perception of life and agency. Elena explained, "Our minds are synchronizing with Earth's emergent intelligence and the interplanetary resonance. We are beginning to perceive the logic of distributed intelligence, a cognitive landscape spanning planet and space." 7. Preparing for the unknown network. Despite the success of the initial interaction, uncertainties persisted. The extrinsic network's intentions are unknown. Human interference, even with ethical safeguards, could have unpredictable effects. Long-term coexistence may require new governance structures for interplanetary ethics and communication. Victor summarized, "We are witnessing the birth of planetary diplomacy on a cosmic scale."
The signals kept pulsing, Earth and the alien resonance learning from each other. Humanity watched in awe, feeling a cosmic connection. Every echo told a story of unity and curiosity. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe for more, and thanks for watching.